All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at the world of alkalizing diets, specifically this concept of nature cure through what we eat.
Yeah, it's a really interesting approach, placing a big emphasis on the power of food to really impact our well-being.
Yeah, for sure. And this source we're looking at makes a pretty big claim right off the bat. It says that our bodies are 80% alkaline. 80%. That seems like a lot.
It does sound like a pretty high number.
So is that really true? And if it is, what does that even mean for our health?
That's a great question. And honestly, to really unpack that, we need to start with the basics of pH balance. Most people are probably familiar with pH from chemistry class. It's basically a measure of how acidic or alkaline something is. But what a lot of people don't realize is just how important that balance is inside our own bodies.
So it's not just about like the pH of our stomach acid or something like that. It goes way beyond that.
Absolutely. Our bodies are like these crazy, intricate ecosystems, and every cell needs to be at a specific pH range to function right. You can almost think of it like your body is constantly working to maintain this delicate balance, kind of like a tightrope walker, carefully making these little adjustments just to stay up on that rope.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good analogy. So walk me through this tightrope walk a little bit. What happens when things start to get off balance?
Well, that's when we might run into a state called acidosis, which basically means the body's getting too acidic. And while our bodies do have these awesome buffering systems, they can handle small ups and downs. But if you have chronic acidosis, that's when it can start to cause some real
What
problems.
kind of problems are we talking about here?
Well, think about it this way. When things inside you are too acidic, your cells can't really talk to each other properly. Nutrients can't get where they need to go. Waste products start building up. It's almost like trying to run a car on the wrong type of fuel,
Yeah.
you know? Eventually, things just start to break down.
Okay, so we definitely want to avoid acidosis. This source mentions a whole bunch of unpleasant symptoms that can come with it. Stuff like feeling tired all the time, digestive issues, even like skin problems. Is that all we're talking about, or are there even more serious things to worry about?
Unfortunately, it can be a lot more serious than that. There's actually research that links chronic acidosis to a greater risk of some pretty scary conditions, like osteoporosis, kidney stones, even some types of cancer.
Wow, okay, so I'm really starting to understand how important this whole pH balance thing is. So how do we make sure that we're staying balanced? Does it all come down to what we eat?
Diet plays a huge role for sure. That's where this idea of alkaline-forming foods comes in. The basic idea is that whatever we eat leaves behind a kind of residue after our body digests it. Some of those residues are acidic and some are alkaline, and over time, those residues can actually shift our internal pH.
So it's like our bodies are constantly taking in information from the foods we eat. And that information then changes what's happening inside us. Pretty incredible how connected it all is.
It really is.
Yeah.
Even though our bodies are amazing at regulating themselves, the kinds of foods that we choose day after day can either help with that balance or make it a lot harder for our bodies to keep things in check.
This source talks about how our bodies are always trying to stay in an alkaline state. So if that's true, do you think all the processed foods and sugar in our modern diets might be making us more acidic?
That's a question that a lot of researchers are looking into right now. And there's more and more evidence that suggests that might be exactly what's happening. I mean, think about it. For most of human history, people ate mostly plants. Lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, that kind of stuff. Those foods tend to be more alkaline forming.
Right, and now we're surrounded by all this processed food, sugary drinks everywhere we look.
Yeah.
And we eat way more animal products than we used to,
Mhm.
which, if I'm understanding this right, tend to be more acidic.
Exactly. So it's not really a surprise that we're seeing more and more health problems that could be linked to chronic low-grade acidosis. And that's why this whole idea of an alkalizing diet can be so powerful. It gives us a way to make food choices that can help our bodies do what they do naturally.
Okay, I'm definitely interested to learn more. So tell me a little bit about the basics of this alkalizing approach. What kinds of foods are we talking about here, and how do we actually put this into practice?
Well, one of the easiest ways to think about it is to picture your plate. Imagine filling it up with all kinds of fresh fruits and vegetables. That's where you'll find your alkaline superstars.
So things like leafy greens, bright berries, colorful peppers, the more color the better, right?
Exactly. Those bright colors are actually little powerhouses packed with antioxidants and minerals,
Ah.
and those things help neutralize acidity and just make you feel good overall.
Okay, so lots of plants on our plates. What are some specific examples of these alkaline-forming foods that might surprise people?
Well, a lot of people are surprised to hear that lemons are actually alkalizing, even though they taste so sour.
Wait a minute, lemons, but they're so acidic. How can something that tastes that sour actually be alkaline forming?
It's one of those things in nutrition that just doesn't seem to make sense at first. But it all comes down to what's left behind after you digest something, not just how it tastes. Lemons have a lot of citric acid, but when your body breaks that down, it actually helps to increase your bicarbonate levels. And bicarbonate is a natural buffer against acidity.
Bicarbonate, isn't that like what's in baking soda?
That's right. And it's super important for keeping your pH balanced. Another good example is almonds. Most nuts are acidic, but almonds have a lot of minerals that help to make things more alkaline.
So if I'm snacking on almonds and sipping on some lemon water, I'm actually helping my body stay balanced.
Exactly. And there are tons of other examples too. Root vegetables like sweet potatoes and beets, cruciferous veggies like broccoli and cauliflower, even some spices like ginger and turmeric. They can all contribute to a more alkaline state.
Okay, so our shopping carts are going to be pretty colorful with all these amazing alkaline-forming foods. But what about the flip side? What are some of the worst offenders when it comes to acid-forming foods?
Well, this is where we start to see the usual suspects. Processed foods, sugary drinks, refined grains. These foods don't usually have a lot of the minerals and fiber that can help balance out the acidity, so they end up creating more of an acidic residue when your body digests them.
So that bag of chips and that can of soda, not doing me any favors.
Probably not. And it's not just the obvious junk food either. Even things that seem healthy like white bread and pasta can be more acid forming. That's because of the refining process. They strip out a lot of the nutrients that could help balance your pH.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. More whole, unprocessed foods, less refined and sugary stuff. Makes sense. But I'm guessing there are some things that might trip people up.
You're right. For example, meat tends to be more acid forming, even lean poultry and fish. And dairy is kind of a mixed bag. Some things like yogurt can be slightly alkalizing, while others like cheese are more acidic.
So it's not quite as black and white as just meat is bad, plants are good. There's a lot more to it. What about coffee? Is that a no-go?
Coffee is a tricky one. Technically, it's acidic, but some research shows that it might not have a huge impact on your overall pH balance, especially if you don't drink too much of it. If you're worried about acidity, you could always switch to tea. Tea is usually more neutral.
Okay, so it sounds like it's all about being informed and figuring out what works best for you. But I got to be honest, I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed with all this talk about acid ash and alkaline ash. How can we actually use this information without getting obsessed with every single thing we eat?
That's a really good point. And the good news is you don't have to become a pH expert to make this work for you. It's not about tracking every food or trying to hit some perfect ratio. Just think of it as a gradual shift in how you eat overall.
So it's more about changing your mindset than following strict rules.
Exactly. Start by loading up your plate with those colorful, alkaline-forming foods we talked about. Try to make sure at least half of every meal is fruits and veggies. Then slowly start cutting back on the more acid-forming choices, like processed snacks, sugary drinks, and too much meat and dairy.
Okay, that sounds doable. Any other tips for making that shift? I'm picturing myself just staring into my fridge trying to figure out the pH of everything.
I love that image. But it really doesn't have to be that complicated. Think about some simple swaps you can make throughout the day. Instead of sugary cereal for breakfast, try oatmeal with berries and some almonds on top. Instead of soda in the afternoon, have a glass of lemon water or herbal tea. And for dinner, make veggies the star of the show, not just a side dish.
These are some great ideas. It's amazing how much small changes can add up. But let's be real. What if you slip up and have a slice of pizza or a piece of cake? Is that going to totally ruin everything?
Absolutely not. Remember, it's about the big picture, not just one meal or a treat here and there. One slice of pizza isn't going to throw your whole pH balance off.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in that all-or-nothing thinking with diets. But it's nice to know there's room for flexibility.
Exactly. It's all about finding a way to eat that works for you and that you can stick with. And don't forget, your body is incredibly resilient. It's always working to find that balance, even if you get off track sometimes.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off and lets you enjoy the process. So it's not about being perfect. It's about making choices that help you feel your best.
Precisely. And that's what makes this alkalizing approach so powerful. It's not about deprivation or rules. It's about giving yourself the power to make choices that help you feel your best.
That's a great way to put it.
Mm.
It's about paying attention to your body and understanding how food can either help or hurt that natural balance.
Exactly. And the more you learn about how it all works, the better you'll be at making choices that support your health and well-being.
Well, this has been a really eye-opening look into the world of alkalizing diets. I feel like I'm starting to get a handle on the basics, but I'm sure our listeners probably have even more questions about how to actually put this into practice.
One question I get a lot is about like the long-term effects of eating this way. Like, is this something you have to do forever? Or is it more like a way to just reset your body?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of people are probably wondering about that.
And I think it really highlights an important point. This isn't about following some strict set of rules. It's more about changing how you think about food, seeing food as information that your body uses.
Right, so it's less about a specific diet plan
Yeah,
and more about just adopting a set of guidelines you can use in your everyday life.
exactly. Think of it as building a foundation of good habits. Habits that help your body do what it's naturally supposed to do.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's about making choices that are good for you, not restricting yourself with a bunch of rules. But speaking of choices, how does this work in the real world?
Yeah.
Like, what about social gatherings? Or going out to eat? Or just those days when you don't have time to cook?
Oh, yeah, I hear you. Those are all real challenges. And it's important to remember that flexibility is key. This is about finding what works for you, not about being perfect. Like, if you're at a restaurant, don't be afraid to ask for substitutions. See if they can modify something to make it more alkaline friendly. Choose dishes with lots of veggies and lean protein. And maybe skip the dessert if it's really sugary. And if you're at a party and there aren't a lot of healthy options, just try to make healthier choices the next day to get back on track.
So just be mindful and make good choices when you can. Don't sweat it if you have a treat every now and then,
Yeah.
or if things don't go exactly as planned.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, nourishing your body, but also enjoying the foods you love without feeling deprived.
Yeah, that's definitely reassuring. I think it's easy to fall into that all or nothing trap when it comes to diet. So it's nice to know that this is more about finding what works for you and sticking with it.
I totally agree. And don't forget to listen to your body. If you're making good choices but still feeling run down or having those symptoms we talked about before, it might be a good idea to dig a little deeper, see if there's something else going on.
Right, so use this information as a starting point. Figure out what works best for you.
Exactly. That's what I love about this approach. It gives you the power to take control of your own health by understanding how the choices you make every day can really make a difference.
I love that. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the science behind pH balance. We busted some myths. And we learned about how adding more alkaline-forming foods to your diet can be really beneficial.
We did, and I hope everyone listening has a better understanding of how food can really impact your health.
Yeah, and most importantly, I think we've shown that this isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. It's about finding what works best for you, listening to your body, and making choices that make you feel your best.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's been great diving into this topic with you.
Likewise.
And of course, with all of you listening, we hope you found this deep dive helpful and inspiring. Remember, there's always more to learn. So stay curious, keep exploring. And as always, we'll be back soon with another deep dive into something new and exciting. Until then, happy alkalizing everyone at cost.